All right, let's talk about two of the biggest, most loaded concepts in all of human history, Satan and hell. We're going to do something a little different, though. We're going to strip away the myths, the pitchforks, and all the fire, and look at them through a new lens, a lens of grammar, logic, and believe it or not, physics. It's a pretty radical idea, so let's just dive right in.
So first things first, we've got to draw a clear line. Over on the left, you've got the version we all know from movies and stories, this epic fantasy drama with warring gods and demons. But on the right, that's the framework we're using today. Think of it less like a story and more like a lawful system, almost like computer code, where something like Satan isn't a character, but a function, a job title. And just making that one little shift changes absolutely everything.
And that leads us to the core question for this whole explainer. What if these ancient texts aren't just myths? What if they're actually something more like a user manual, a description of a kind of spiritual operating system for reality itself? Let's pull on that thread, shall we? Let's see how deep this rabbit hole really goes.
So first up, we have to tackle the big guy himself, Satan. We all have this picture in our heads, right? The fallen angel, a singular, specific evil being. But what if the original language was pointing to something, well, something much more functional?
Okay, the key that unlocks this whole thing is grammar. I know, bear with me. The term is predicate nominative. It sounds complicated, but all it really means is when a word is used to describe a function someone is performing, not who they fundamentally are. It's like a temporary job title, not a permanent name on a birth certificate.
And you see this grammatical structure all over the place in the source texts. When it says, you are salt, it's describing the function of preservation. When it says, you are light, it's talking about the function of illumination. So, when we get to a phrase like you are Satan, the pattern holds. It's not an identity. It's describing the function of being an adversary, an opposer, in that specific moment.
And this all crystallizes in that famous scene where Jesus turns to his own top disciple, Peter, and calls him Satan. Now, think about it. Is he really saying Peter has literally suddenly turned into a demon? Of course not. He's naming the adversarial role Peter has stepped into right then and there. It's a job description, not a monster.
You know, this completely flips the power dynamic we're used to. If Satan is just a role, a temporary office, then it has some serious limitations. It has no power to create, it has no power to own anyone's soul, it definitely has no authority to pass judgment or sentence anyone, and it has absolutely no power to bind anyone permanently. It's the office of opposition, sure, but it's an office with zero actual authority in the system.
So this totally reframes that whole selling your soul idea you see in movies. In this system, you can't actually sell your soul. It's not a piece of property. What's really happening is a choice. It's a person voluntarily transferring their allegiance, their focus, to a broken, false way of operating. It's not a demonic contract, it's an internal alignment with something that isn't real. The texts actually have a word for this: idolatry.
Okay, so if Satan is a job title, what about hell? Let's shift gears and look at our next huge concept. We're moving from the world of law and grammar into the laboratory of physics. The question is hell about torture or is it about thermodynamics?
Now, I need you to stick with me for a super quick physics lesson because this is absolutely crucial. There's a real thing in physics called Landauer's principle. And what it says, basically, is that to erase even one bit of information from a system, you have to pay a tiny energy cost. And that energy gets released as heat. So the key takeaway is this: deleting information creates heat. Just tuck that idea away for a second.
And here's where it all clicks into place. If hell is a process of correcting errors, of deleting a corrupt, false identity, a false ego, then according to the laws of physics, that process must generate heat. So the fire of hell in this model isn't for punishment. It's the literal thermodynamic byproduct of the system deleting bad code while carefully preserving the user. And what's wild is that the original language totally backs this up. When the texts talk about being able to destroy both soul and body in hell, the original Greek word they use is apolesai. And that word doesn't mean annihilate or erase from existence. It means to unbind, to dismantle, to dissolve a configuration. It's about terminating a false system, not the person operating it.
A really powerful way to picture this is to think about a black hole. So, step 1, imagine your false ego is like a faulty line of code. an equation that insists 2 plus 2 equals 5. Now, imagine that faulty code runs smack into the system's core programming, into absolute truth. Step 2, the system can't compute the contradiction. It's a fatal error. And step 3, the false structure, that 2 plus 2 equals 5 reality, just collapses under the pressure, and its information gets transformed.
So, we have Satan as a role and hell as a mechanism for error correction. How in the world do these two ideas fit together? Well, this is where we see the system's two main pathways for getting everyone aligned with reality: grace and judgment.
It seems the system has two paths, but they both lead to the same destination. The first path is grace, and that's basically an invitation. It says, hey, choose to let go of this false self and you'll find your real one. The second path is judgment, and that's the system's failsafe. It says, well, if you refuse the invitation, that false self has to be deleted anyway, because its very existence violates the system's core programming.
And here's the most important part. The destination is exactly the same. Whether you go down the path of willing surrender or the path of necessary correction, the outcome is identical. The false ego construct is terminated, and the actual person is preserved, protected, and realigned with what is true.
So let's bring this all home. The fundamental logic, the core principle of this entire operating system, seems to be about correcting error, not punishing beings. It's a system designed from the ground up to delete falsehood, not souls.
So the whole logic of this system really boils down to this. The adversarial role, that temporary Satan function, that's what gets judged and terminated. But the person, the actual being who temporarily performed that role, is preserved, corrected, and restored. The system judges the office, not the office holder.
And let's end on this one. Profound thought. In this framework, the fire that has inspired so much fear and terror throughout history isn't an act of cruelty. It is the unavoidable thermodynamic byproduct of a perfect system correcting a destructive error. It is the metabolic heat of correction. It's not about punishment, it's about restoration.